The invitation, rain had been falling all morning in Palo Alto, soft but steady, blurring the edges of the houses outside Sundar's window. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the envelope in his hands. It was ivory, heavy, and smooth far. Too elegant for the kind of news it carried. His fingers traced the golden script of his name, as if touching it would somehow make the contents inside less real. He already knew what it was. The moment he saw the handwriting, a familiar ache pressed into his chest. Leena, his first love, his ex-wife, the woman he had once believed would grow old with him. He slid a finger under the flap and opened it slowly, as though speed might make it hurt more. Inside was a simple card, tasteful and understated with gold embossed letters. You are warmly invited to celebrate the wedding of Leena Sharma and Raghav Malhotra. Date, December 10th. Location, Le Meridian, San Francisco. His breath caught. Raghav. He remembered that name. Not well, but enough to stir something uneasy in him. He read the invitation again. The words blurred slightly, not from the rain, but from the heaviness building behind his eyes. He leaned back in the chair, closing his eyes for a moment. 1,000 memories flooded him early mornings in their tiny apartment. Coffee brewing while Leena laughed at something he'd said. Nights when they had nothing but dreams and cheap takeout. Fights that burned through the air but always ended with whispered apologies and promises of forever. But forever had ended. Quietly, almost politely. No big betrayal, no scandal, just distance. Her desire for a different life, his relentless work hours, the slow fading of laughter in the rooms they shared. He had let her go. Or so he thought. Now she was marrying someone else. The kitchen felt colder somehow. Sundar's phone buzzed on the table, pulling him out of the haze. A message from Raghav, his oldest friend since college. Did you get the invite? He didn't. Answer right away. Instead, he typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, yes. Within seconds, Raghav replied, Are you going? That was the question, wasn't it? His mind screamed no. His pride said no. But something deeper, something quieter, whispered yes. Why yes? To show he was fine? To prove he could face her without breaking? Or because a part of him still needed to see her one last time, even if it meant watching her marry another man? That night, sleep wouldn't come. He tossed and turned, the sound of rain giving way to the echo of Leena's voice in his head. Not the voice from their last years together, tired and resigned, but the one from the early days, warm. Playful, endlessly curious. By 3 a.m., he found himself in the living room, scrolling through old photos he swore he deleted. There they were in Goa, laughing in the ocean waves. In New York, standing under a snowfall, cheeks flushed from the cold. In Bangalore, holding hands in the market like they were the only two people in the world. He closed the album. His chest tight. The wedding was in 2 weeks. The following day, Sundar found himself distracted at work. Numbers blurred on the screen. His assistant had to repeat things twice before they sank in. He kept picturing Leena in a wedding dress, not the one from their wedding years ago, but a new one, white and flowing, chosen for someone else. By late afternoon, he gave up trying to focus and went for a walk. The air was crisp, the sidewalks slick with rain. He passed a small flower shop and paused. The scent of roses drifted out, pulling him inside. The florist, an elderly woman with kind eyes, greeted him. Looking for something special? He hesitated. Just looking. He wandered between the rows of blooms, touching the petals lightly. White lily, red roses, yellow tulips. Each one carried memories. On their second anniversary, he had brought Leena a single white lily. Saying it reminded him of her simple, elegant, impossible to ignore. She had laughed, kissed him, and said she hoped he'd keep finding reasons to bring flowers. He hadn't, not as often as he should have. Raghav called that evening. So, have you decided? Not yet, Sundar said. Look, man, I know. Not easy, but sometimes showing up isn't about them. It's about you. It's about proving to yourself you can walk into that room and hold your head high. And if I can't, Then you'll know. But don't hide. You've never been that guy. After they hung up, Sundar sat in silence. His gaze drifted back to the invitation on the counter. The gold letter seemed to shine a little brighter under the kitchen light, daring him to make a choice. 3 days later, he found himself in a tailor's shop being measured for a new suit. Navy blue, understudded, nothing flashy. The tailor asked what the occasion was. Sundar hesitated before saying, "A wedding? Family?" "Something like that," he replied quietly on the way home. He stopped at a bookstore. An idea had been forming in his mind. A gift. Not a grand gesture, not something to win her back, but something meaningful. He walked through the aisles until he found it. A leather-bound journal, blank inside. He didn't know why, but it felt right. That night. He opened the journal and wrote only one line on the first page. "I hope this next chapter is everything you dreamed it would be." The day of the wedding came faster than he expected. As he stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, he felt a knot in his stomach. He wasn't nervous about seeing Leena, at least that's what he told himself. It was something else. An unease he couldn't quite name. When he arrived at Lee Meridian, the lobby was buzzing with guests in elegant clothes. He caught sight of familiar faces, mutual friends, distant relatives, some doing double takes when they saw him, and then through the glass doors to the courtyard. He saw her Leena, in a white gown, her hair swept up, a smile on her face as she spoke to someone. For a moment, the noise around him faded, and it was just her, as if time had folded in on itself. She looked happy. Genuinely happy. But then, as he stepped closer, he noticed something strange. The man beside her, Raghav, was leaning in, speaking low, his expression tense. Leena's smile faltered for the briefest second before she caught herself and laughed. Too quickly. Sundar froze, watching. Something in her eyes, just for a moment, looked the wrong. And then she saw him. Her smile returned, warmer now. But there was a flicker of something else in her gaze. Surprise. Uncertainty. Maybe even relief. Before he could read it further. Raghav turned, his eyes meeting Sundar's with a sharpness that felt almost like a warning. And in that moment, Sundar knew this wedding wasn't what it seemed. Asterisk, the shadow in the celebration. Words landed on Sundar's ears like a cold splash of water. "You shouldn't be here. You don't know the truth." He turned sharply. Behind him stood an older man in a dark gray suit, his hair peppered with white, his eyes fixed on Sundar with unsettling intensity. He didn't recognize the face, but the gaze carried a weight, as if this man knew more than he should. Before Sundar could speak, the man stepped back into the crowd, disappearing between clusters of laughing guests and waiters, carrying champagne flutes. The courtyard glowed with warm string light, the soft hum of conversation mixing with a clink of glasses. Everything about it was beautiful, perfect, curated to appear effortless. Yet, Sundar's chest tightened. Perfection had a way of hiding the mess beneath. He took a slow breath, scanning the room for the man again, but saw only strangers smiling politely as they brushed past him. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe it was just nerves playing tricks on him. But deep down, he knew he hadn't. The tone in that voice had been too precise, too deliberate. Leena and Raghav were still near the fountain, greeting guests. Sundar walked toward them, each step feeling heavier. Her gaze caught his again, and for a brief second, the joy in her smile softened into something quieter, almost fragile. She touched Raghav's arm and leaned close to whisper something. Raghav nodded, his jaw tightening, before turning to face Sundar as he approached. "Sundar," Leena said, her voice warm but threaded with caution. "You came." "I did," he replied, managing a small smile. "Congratulations to you both." Raghav extended his hand. His grip was firm, almost too firm, the kind that wasn't about greeting, but about testing strength. "Thank you for coming," he said, his eyes never leaving Sundar's. There was no malice in his tone, but no warmth either, just a measured politeness. "It's a beautiful ceremony," Sundar said, glancing at Leena. "You look happy." Her lips curved into a smile. but her eyes flickered, darting briefly toward Raghav before returning to Sundar. Thank you. It means a lot that you're here. As they spoke, a photographer called for the couple. Raghav placed a hand on Leena's back, guiding her away. But as she passed Sundar, she mouthed something so quickly he almost missed it. Please, stay. The words clung to him, heavier than they should have been. Why would she need to ask him to stay? Wasn't that what any polite bride would want from a guest? But no, it wasn't the words themselves. It was the way her lips moved, the slight tremble in her expression, as if the request wasn't about politeness at all. A waiter passed by, offering champagne. Sundar took a glass more out of habit than desire. He scanned the room again for that older man, but instead saw Rajiv weaving through the crowd toward him. You made it, Rajiv said, clapping him on the shoulder. You doing okay? Fine, Sundar lied. Rajiv raised an eyebrow. You don't look fine. You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have, Sundar murmured. Rajiv frowned but didn't press. Instead, he handed Sundar an envelope. This came for you. Some kid at the front said it was urgent. Didn't give a name. The envelope was plain white, unmarked, sealed with a thin strip of tape. Sundar glanced around again before slipping it into his jacket pocket. The timing was too strange. The music shifted, signaling the start of the formal announcements. The guests began moving toward the reception hall. Its doors opened to reveal a room drenched in golden light, with tables draped in ivory cloth and centerpieces of roses and lily. Sundar followed, taking a seat near the back, where he could watch. Without being watched, as Raghav and Leena entered to applause, Sundar let his gaze linger on her. She looked radiant, yes, but there was still that fleeting shadow in her smile, gone as quickly as it came. It was the same look she'd had during their last months together, when she wanted to tell him something but couldn't find the words. The speeches began. Friends spoke of love, loyalty, and fate. Laughter filled the room, but Sundar's mind was elsewhere. The envelope in his pocket seemed to grow heavier with each passing minute. Finally, unable to wait, he excused himself and slipped out into a quiet hallway. The sound of music and clinking glasses faded behind him as he opened the envelope. Inside was a single-fold note, written in hurried, almost shaky handwriting. This is not the life she chose. She needs help. Watch him. The words made his pulse quicken. He read them again, each syllable pressing deeper into his thoughts. Who wrote this, and what exactly did they mean by watch him? He was still staring at the note when a voice broke the silence. Curiosity can be dangerous, Sundar. He looked up sharply to see Raghav standing at the end of the hallway, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. What do you mean? Sundar asked, his voice calm but edged. Raghav took a slow step forward. I mean, sometimes. It's better to enjoy the celebration and not go looking for stories that aren't yours to tell. Their eyes locked, the air between them tightening. And sometimes, Sundar replied evenly, the story finds you whether you want it or not. A silence stretched between them. Then Raghav smiled, not warmly, but with the kind of controlled amusement that made Sundar's stomach turn. Careful, Raghav said. You wouldn't want to cause trouble for someone you once claimed to care about. He turned and walked away, his polished shoes clicking against the marble, leaving Sundar with the note still clutched in his hand, back in the reception hall. Laughter and music swelled again, but Sundar couldn't shake the weight of what had just happened. The man's warning from earlier, Leena's whispered plea. The note, they were threads of something larger, something wrong. He looked toward the head table, where Leena sat beside Raghav, smiling for the crowd, but not once meeting Sundar's eyes, and he knew then he couldn't just be a guest anymore. Asterisk. The meeting in the shadows, music from the reception hall followed Sundar into the hallway, like a ghost, muffled but still pulsing through the walls. In his pocket, the phone was still warm from the call. The voice, that hushed, trembling urgency, repeated itself in his head. If you want to help her, meet me outside in 5 minutes. Don't let anyone see you leave. He checked his watch. 5 minutes. Not much time to think. Not enough time to weigh whether this was foolish or necessary doubt. He slipped the note back into his jacket, its edges crinkling as if reminding him it was still there, still relevant. Taking one last look toward the golden glow of the reception, he adjusted his tie, straightened his jacket, and began moving toward the side exit. The hallway was dimmer here, lined with paintings of landscapes and framed black and white photos of San Francisco in the early 1900s. His footsteps sounded too loud. Every click of his shoes on the marble floor like a signal to anyone watching. Twice, he thought he heard footsteps behind him, but when he glanced over his shoulder, the corridor was empty. As he pushed through the side door, the cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain-soaked pavement and distant ocean. The contrast from the warm, perfumed reception was jarring. Outside, the hotel's garden stretched in muted tones, wet cobblestones glistening under dim lanterns, leaves dripping from earlier showers, the faint rustle of wind through tall hedges. He scanned the area. No one. A flicker of movement caught his eye near the far end of the garden, beyond the fountain. A woman stood partially in shadow, her coat hood pulled low over her face. She motioned for him to come closer, her gestures sharp but silent. Hesitated for a second, then walked toward her, the stone slick beneath his shoes. When he reached her, she lowered her hood. Her eyes were dark, serious, and unmistakably tense. "You don't know me?" she began, her voice low and urgent. "But I know Leena. We used to work together before she met him. Raghav? Sundar?" She nodded. "Yes, I don't have much time. He's not who he says he is. He's charming, polite in public, but when the doors close, he's controlling, manipulative. Everything is on his terms. She's not safe." Sundar felt a chill run through him that had nothing to do with the weather. Then why is she marrying him? The woman's jaw tightened. Because he's made? Her believes she has no choice. He's got ways of making people stay. Money, influence, fear. I've seen it. I saw it happen to someone else before her. His mind spun. The Leena he knew, strong-willed, fiercely independent, would never tolerate someone controlling her. But then he remembered the fleeting shadows in her smile. The way she looked away from Raghav's gaze, the whispered, "Please stay." "Why are you telling me this?" Sundar asked. "Because you're the only one here who knows her well enough to see through the performance. Everyone else believes the fairy tale. You don't." She glanced toward the hotel entrance, as if expecting someone to appear. She needs a way out, but she can't ask for it openly. If you push too hard, he'll know. And if he knows, he'll make sure she disappears from your life again, permanently. Before Sundar could ask more, a sound broke the quiet. The crunch of footsteps approaching from the direction of the garden side path. The woman's eyes widened. "We're out of time." She reached into her coat pocket and pressed something into his hand. It was small, cold, and metallic. A silver key attached to a tag that read room 514. "Find what's in that room before midnight," she whispered. "It will tell you everything." Without waiting for a reply, she pulled her hood back up and slipped into the hedgeland path, vanishing into the darkness as quickly as she had appeared. Sundar stood frozen for a moment, the key digging into his palm. The sound of footsteps grew louder. Turning toward the path, he saw Raghav emerging from the shadows, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. "There you are," Raghav said smoothly. "Guests have been asking where you went." Sundar forced a polite smile. "Just needed some fresh air." Raghav's gaze dropped briefly to Sundar's hand, and Sundar instinctively slipped the key into his pocket. "Enjoying the evening?" Raghav asked, stepping closer. "It's memorable," Sundar replied, evenly. Ragha. Friend held his gaze for a moment, longer, as if weighing the words, then nodded slowly. "Good. I'm sure you'll find it worth remembering." They walked back inside together, the hum of laughter and clinking, glasses returning to surround them. But Sundar's mind wasn't on the wedding anymore. It was on the key, the room number, and the unknown truth waiting upstairs. He sat through the rest of the dinner without tasting a single bite. his eyes flicking toward the hotel's elevators every few minutes. Midnight felt impossibly far. Away, yet dangerously close. The speeches, the toasts, the polite conversations, they blurred into a background hum he barely heard. Across the room, Leena caught his gaze once. She didn't smile this time. Instead, she blinked slowly, almost deliberately, before turning away. It wasn't much, but it was enough to tell him she knew something, and maybe she knew he was already in motion as the band began playing another round of upbeat songs. Guests filled the dance floor. Sundar slipped away toward the elevators, moving quickly but not hurriedly. On the 5th floor, the hallways were empty, the carpet muffling his steps. He found the door to room 514 and stood there for a moment, listening. Silence. He slid the key into the lock. His heart pounding harder with every turn. The door clicked open. Inside. The room was dim, lit only by the glow from the city lights. Outside the window, a suitcase lay open on the bed, papers spilling out onto the comforter. He stepped inside and closed the door softly behind him as he reached for the nearest stack of papers. His fingers brushed over something else, a small black recording device. He pressed play. The first voice was unmistakable. Leena, please. Raghav, I just need some space. Then came Raghav's voice, low and cold. Space? The only space you'll have is the one I give you. Don't forget who controls your future. The sound of glass shattering followed. And then the recording cut off. Asterisk, the door opened. Metallic rattle of the handle cut through the silence like a warning bell. Sundar's entire body stiffened. The recording device was still in his hand, its weight suddenly heavier, more dangerous than it had been a second ago. He glanced around the room in an instant, his mind racing. The papers on, the bed, the half-zipped suitcase, the open curtains, all of it screamed that someone lived here. Someone who would notice immediately that a stranger had been inside. He moved quickly, sliding the recorder into his jacket pocket, sweeping the nearest pile of papers into the suitcase, and pulling the zipper just enough to hide the mess. The handle turned again, slower this time, as though the person on the other side knew they weren't alone. Asterisk. There was no time to hide in the bathroom or behind the bed. The only option was to be on his feet, standing, looking like he belonged there, though every cell in his body knew he didn't. The door opened. Raghav stepped inside, his tall frame filling the doorway. The hallway light cast a sharp silhouette around him, but his face was clear, composed. But with a thin thread of suspicion woven into his expression, his eyes scanned the room, then locked on Sundar. What are you doing? Here. Raghav's voice was quiet, almost gentle, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath it. Sundar forced his own voice to remain steady. I was looking for the restroom and must have taken the wrong turn. The door was unlocked. Raghav's eyes narrowed just enough to betray his doubt. Room 514 is far from the restrooms. I must have wandered farther than I thought. Sundar replied, keeping his tone even. There was a long pause. The kind that makes seconds feel like hours. Raghav stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind him. You know, he said, moving toward the window. People can get into a lot of trouble by being in places they don't belong. Sundar didn't move. Or maybe they find things they weren't supposed to see. Raghav turned his head slightly, his gaze sharp as a blade. And what exactly did you see? Just a room, Sundar said carefully. A suitcase, some papers. Raghav's smile was thin. Papers can be misleading. Sometimes they tell a story that isn't true. Sometimes they tell just enough truth to hurt someone. The air between them thickened. Sundar could feel his heartbeat in his throat, but he held Raghav's gaze. He didn't want to show fear. Not now, not when he had confirmation of what kind of man Raghav really was. Then Raghav stepped closer, his voice dropping lower. You've already had your turn with her. Now it's mine. Stay out of it, or I'll make sure you regret it. He brushed past Sundar toward the desk, as though the conversation was over. Sundar took the chance to move toward the door, his hand tightening around the key still in his pocket just before leaving. He looked back. She's not a prize to be passed around. She's a person. And Whether you like it or not, she still has people who care about her. Raghav's smirk deepened, but he said nothing. Back in the corridor, Sundar walked away without looking back, but his pulse didn't slow until he reached the elevator. He leaned against the mirrored wall inside, trying to steady his breathing. The recording in his pocket felt like both a weapon and a curse, proof of Raghav's control, but also a dangerous secret that could put Leena at even greater risk. If handled the wrong way, when he returned to the reception hall, the party was still in full swing. Guests were dancing, laughing, clinking glasses. It was surreal. The bright, joyful scene completely at odds with the storm brewing just beyond its edges. He spotted Leena near the dessert table, speaking politely to an elderly couple. When their conversation ended, her eyes found his. She gave a quick glance toward the far balcony and then walked away in that direction without a word. Taking the cue, Sundar followed after a short delay. Outside, the city lights glittered below, and the faint hum of traffic rose from the streets. She stood near the railing, her back to him. You shouldn't have come tonight, she said without turning. You asked me to stay, he replied. Finally, she faced him. Her eyes were bright, but there was no happiness in them. Only fear, tightly wrapped in composure. And he finds out you're involved. I already am, Sundar said, his voice steady. I know what's going on. I know you're not. Safe with him. Her lips parted as if to deny it, but no words came. Instead, she looked away, gripping the railing until her knuckles whitened. I can help you, he continued. But you need to trust me. Trust you? Her voice trembled now. The last time I trusted you, you left me when I needed you most. The words cut deeper than he expected. Leena, it's not that simple anymore, she interrupted. He has connections. If I leave without his consent, it won't just be me he goes after. There are people I can't put at risk. What people? Sundar asked. She shook her head, her eyes glistening. I can't tell you. Not here. Not now. From inside, the music swelled again, a sharp reminder that the rest of the world was still celebrating. But here, on this balcony, there was only the low hum of tension between them. Sundar took a slow step closer. Whatever it is, we can find a way, he said quietly. But you have to give me something to work with. She glanced over her shoulder toward the glass doors, checking if anyone was watching. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, he keeps something in the suite upstairs. Something that could destroy him. If it's gone, he'll know. Her hand brushed his, slipping a folded napkin into his palm. This is the only piece of the puzzle I can give you tonight. Keep it hidden, and don't come near me until you're ready to finish this. Before Sundar could open the napkin, the doors to the balcony swung open, and Raghav stepped out, his smile wide and public again. There you two are. I was wondering if you'd found old memories to talk about. Leena straightened immediately, her face returning to the role she was playing. Just catching up, she said lightly. Raghav's eyes flicked to Sundar, and in that brief exchange, Sundar could feel the warning in them. Asterisk, the penthouse secret keycard felt almost alive in Sundar's palm. Its smooth plastic strangely warm, as if it had been held tight for a long time before reaching him. You're not the only target. The 4 words scrawled on the napkin were still echoing in his mind as he sat in his car. Rain whispering against the windshield. Streetlights cast pale halos on the wet pavement. And somewhere far away, the faint hum of the city moved on, oblivious to the fact that inside his head, the world had slowed to a crawl. He closed his eyes and took a long breath, forcing his thoughts into order. Room 514 had already told him enough to confirm Raghav's control over Leena. But if the penthouse held something more, something dangerous enough for her to risk giving him this key, then it was the kind of truth that could burn everything down. And the warning, you're not the only target, it meant the game was bigger than just Raghav and Leena. Bigger than old love or private betrayal. Someone else was in danger. Maybe many someones. Back inside the hotel, the reception was still going. But it had shifted into that late night rhythm where laughter was Louder, drinks stronger, and conversations looser. Sundar slipped through the crowd with a practiced calm, nodding politely when someone greeted him, pausing briefly when a guest made small talk, all the while moving steadily toward the elevator. When the door slid shut and the floor numbers began to climb, he found himself watching his reflection in the mirrored walls. His expression was steady, but his eyes were restless. Why am I doing this? He asked himself. The easy answer was for Leena. The truer answer, the one that sat deeper, was that he couldn't stand by and pretend not to see someone being caged. Not when he knew the feeling of losing control over his own life. The elevator stopped at the top floor with a muted chime. Penthouse hallway was different from the others. Quieter, more insulated. Carpet so thick it muffled even the sound of his steps. Soft, golden sconces lined the walls, and the air carried a faint scent of expensive cologne and polished wood. He counted 3 doors. The last one bore a sleek brass plate with the word penthouse engraved in understated letters. He slipped the card into the slot. A green light flashed out. The door opened with a whisper dot inside. The space was more like a private residence than a hotel suite. The living room stretched wide, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a sweeping view of the city lights below. Everything was immaculate. Marble floors, cream leather furniture, glass tables with edges so sharp they seemed to cut the air, but the beauty of it felt sterile, like a place meant to impress, not to live in. He moved carefully, his senses tuned to every sound. The place felt empty, but emptiness could be deceiving. On the far side, a hallway led to what looked like a private study. The door was ajar. Stepping inside, he found shelves of books arranged in perfect symmetry. The scent of leather and old paper thick in the air. A large desk sat near the window, its surface too clean, except for a single locked drawer. He scanned the desk, searching for a key, but instead his eyes fell on a thin envelope tucked under a leather blotter. It was addressed to Board of Directors. The return address was unfamiliar, but when he lifted it, he could feel the weight of multiple photographs inside. He slid one out, his stomach tightened. The photograph showed Leena sitting at a cafe, smiling. But she wasn't alone. Next to her was a man Sundar didn't recognize, leaning in close, speaking into her ear. The angle of the shot, the grain of the image, told him immediately it had been taken from a distance, in secret dot beneath that. Photo was another, and another. Each one a different person, each in a different location, all taken without their knowledge. He counted at least 7 different individuals, all with notes scrawled on the back, dates, times, and in some cases, short phrases, like pressure, point, or leverage. Family targets. The warning on the napkin was no longer just a cryptic phrase. It was a fact. A faint sound broke his focus. The almost imperceptible hum of the elevator doors opening down the hall. Someone was coming. Sundar quickly slid the photos back into the envelope, tucking it into his jacket. He scanned the room for another way out and spotted a second door on the far wall, slightly narrower. It led into the master bedroom. He slipped inside and closed it softly behind him. The bedroom was dim, the curtains drawn, but enough light leaked through to reveal a walk-in wardrobe on the left and another door leading to the bathroom. He moved toward the wardrobe, pulling the door just enough to step inside. The scent hit him first. Not cologne, not fabric, but something faintly chemical, like antiseptic. And then he saw it. On the wardrobe floor was a small, locked metal case. Beside it, a manila folder lay, partially open. He crouched down and flipped the folder open just enough to see its contents. Inside were legal documents, contracts, non-disclosure agreements, and what looked like signed statements from various people. His eyes caught one name in bold at the top of a page, Ananya Shah. He didn't know the name, but the date on the document was recent. Before he could read further, footsteps entered the bedroom. The voice that followed made his skin tighten. I thought I might find you here. Sundar rose slowly, turning to see Raghav standing in the doorway, his posture casual, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass of red wine. You really don't know when to quit, do you? Raghav said, his tone almost amused. Depends. On what you think I'm doing, Sundar replied, keeping his voice even. Raghav stepped into the room, circling slightly. Oh, I know exactly what you're doing. The question is, do you know what you're walking into? Their eyes locked, and Sundar felt it, the weight of a man who wasn't bluffing. Asterisk the truth behind the door of light from the hidden room spilled into the bedroom like a cold blade, sharp and unforgiving. Sundar stood frozen, his eyes struggling to process what he was seeing. Leena was there, not in a wedding dress, not in a perfect image she had worn for the crowd downstairs, but in a simple cream sweater and dark jeans. Her hair was tied back loosely, strands falling over her face. She looked smaller somehow, not in height, but in presence, as if a weight had been pressing her down for far too long. Her eyes met Sundar's, and in that instant there was no mask. The fear, the exhaustion, the quiet desperation, it was all there, raw and unguarded. Sundar, she whispered, her voice barely carrying across the room. Raghav's voice cut through the air. Go ahead, he said, his tone silky. Ask her. Ask her what she's doing here instead of downstairs, smiling for the guests. Sundar stepped forward, the carpet muffling his steps, but every movement felt loud in the tense silence. Leena. What's going on? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced at Raghav, as if gauging how much she was allowed to say. Raghav gave a small shrug, a gesture so casual it chilled Sundar more than any shout could have. He has my brother, she said finally, her voice breaking halfway through the sentence. He's been holding him for weeks. Not locked in a room, but trapped in a mess that Raghav created. Debts, threats, everything. If I don't stay, if I don't marry him, my brother disappears. Sundar's stomach clenched. The photographs, the notes, the word leverage scrawled on the backs. It all clicked into place. She wasn't the only one. Every person in those photos had someone or something they loved hanging over them. So, you see, Raghav said smoothly, this isn't about love or choice. It's about survival. Something I'm very good at ensuring and taking away. Sundar turned to him, anger simmering low in his chest. You think this is power? Controlling people by hurting the ones they love? Raghav smiled and faltered. I think this is reality. And you just stepped into it. For a moment, silence filled the space again. Sundar's mind was working, fast but careful. There was the envelope of photographs in his jacket. The recording from room 514, and now the knowledge of this hidden room. He had evidence, but getting it out without alerting Raghav would be the real fight. He turned back to Leena. Where's your brother? She shook her head. Not here, but he's being watched. Raghav has people everywhere. People who work for him because they fear him, Sundar said. Just like you. He took a step closer to Raghav. If I walk out of here, nothing changes. You keep her. You keep hurting others. And you think you win. But here's the thing, you're not the only one who knows how to use leverage. Raghav tilted his head slightly, as if amused. And what do you have exactly? Sundar's hand slipped into his jacket. Enough to make sure the people downstairs don't just remember your wedding. They remember the moment your empire fell apart. The change in Raghav's expression was subtle, but real. A small tightening around the eyes, a faint twitch at the corner of his mouth. You wouldn't dare, Raghav said, his tone still calm, but laced with something new. Unease. Try. Sundar replied. The standoff stretched for several long seconds before Alina's voice broke through. Please, both of you. Stop. She stepped forward, her voice shaking. Sundar, I don't want blood. I just want this to end. Sundar nodded slowly, but his gaze stayed locked on Raghav. Then it ends tonight. You let her walk out of here. You leave her brother alone. And you stop whatever you're doing to the others. And if I say no? Raghav asked. Then every person in that reception hall gets a front row seat too. The truth. Another pause. The faint hum of the city below seemed louder in the stillness. Raghav's jaw tightened, but finally he stepped back. Fine. She can go. But remember something, Sundar. Saving her doesn't mean you've saved everyone. One step at a time, Sundar said quietly. He turned to Leena and offered his hand. She hesitated for half a second before taking it. Together they stepped out of the hidden room, past Raghav, and toward the hallway. The elevator ride down was silent. When the doors opened to the lobby, the noise of the wedding reception was almost surreal. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses, as if nothing upstairs had happened at all, outside. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean under. The streetlights. Leena stood on the curb, her breath visible in the cool night air. "Thank you," she said softly. "It's not over," Sundar replied. "But you're safe tonight. And tomorrow, we make sure it can't hurt anyone else." She nodded, and for the first time that evening, there was something in her eyes other than fear. A spark of hope got as she got into the waiting car. Sundar stayed on the sidewalk, watching until the tail lights disappeared into the distance. He slipped his hand into his jacket, feeling the envelope of photographs and the recording device. Raghav was right about one thing. Saving one person didn't mean saving them all. But Sundar had decided, standing in that cold, hidden room, that he wasn't walking away from this fight. Not now, not ever. And somewhere above him, in the glow of the penthouse windows, Raghav stood watching, wine glass in hand, already planning his next move. Asterisk.